Hey guys,
I'm Abby.
And I'm Shawna, and we're the host of a podcast called Anxious and Afraid.
Do you love deep dives into true crime,
the paranormal,
strange history,
conspiracies? Well, so do we, and each week we take turns surprising each other with whatever anxiety-inducing subject we are obsessed with that week.
Tune in each week to hear Shawna mispronounce words.
The guys on the lookout apparently asked for binoculars. Did I say that right?
So the photos showed him and his colleague entertaining... Wait, am I saying it wrong? Yes. And listen in as Abby constantly asks too many questions.
I was about to ask you a lot of questions, and I'm glad that you interrupted me. Continue.
I would have told you to shut up.
I don't know.
I don't know what
Stop
I'm trying
quizzing
to
me.
do.
Okay, you know, I did enough research. Let me just tell the damn story.
Jesus. Continue. Episodes drop every Tuesday, available wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also find us at our website, anxiousandafraid.com.
We're always looking for new friends, so don't forget to rate and subscribe.
The Oracl Network.
The Oracl Network.
Look deeper.
This is Dos Spookqueños,
a funnier look at the paranormal in New Mexico.
with your co-ghosts, Eric Carter Landine.
and Alex.
Well, what's up, Alex?
Not much, Eric. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm very excited for today. We are recording with somebody who I have been following for a little while. This is an author that is very important to the paranormal world in New Mexico and abroad as well. And we've referenced some of his books in a couple of our episodes. So I'm having a little bit of a fan guy moment here and super excited to welcome Benjamin Radford here today to talk with us about paranormal stuff in New Mexico. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Thank you. So we were talking a little bit about New Mexico and some concerts that we've been to prior to recording, but I wanted to spend some time today talking about you, your career, a little bit about the paranormal in New Mexico. Hopefully you'll have some good stories for us. I have really enjoyed the two books of yours that I've read, which are Mysterious New Mexico, as well as Tracking the Chupacabra. And I'm looking forward to reading Bad Clowns now. Yeah, I have that on my desk, actually. So could you just take a moment and tell us a little bit about your career, your experience, and what got you interested in investigating the paranormal?
Sure. Yeah. I grew up here in New Mexico, actually in Corrales, and I went to Cibola High School and Taylor and the whole thing. So I spent most of my life here. I did move to Buffalo, New York for a decade, which had its pros and cons, let me tell you. But it was cool. And so, when I was growing up, I always had this fascination with weird things, right? Because they're weird things, right? How can you not love weird things? The strange shit is the interesting stuff, right? And so I remember very clearly because I was always a big reader in school, and so I remember getting my my allowance, and so I'd get $5 whatever for cleaning out the cat box and whatever else, and so I'd just like, okay, well, what am I going to spend on? Of course, back then dating myself, but a pack of gum was 25 cents. Good luck with that. We're now is your age. Anyway, so I'm like, well, you know what? Let me go to the used bookstore. So I'd go to the used bookstore and, I'd plunk down some dollars. And then like during the summers, I would just come back with armloads of books. And they're just like books on like like UFOs and the Bermuda Triangle and psychics and Bigfoot and just crazy stuff. And I was like so into it for a couple, like when I was say between like 14 and 17 or so. And I just loved all these books and, ghosts and stuff. But one thing that I found was that I kind of got disillusioned because I was buying all these books and some of them were from the 80s and 70s and, Stranger Than Science, Unknown Mysteries of blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, this is cool. And then I'm reading the stuff, but I realized that more and more of what I was reading, it was sort of like third-hand stories. It was like, somebody said that somebody said that a UFO crashed in Boise, Idaho in 1952.
Right.
I'm like, hold on. Who is this person? Why didn't I hear about this somewhere else? Where in Boise did it crash? Who's the name of the eyewitness? Are there any photographs that said just, over and over and over again, when I'm reading these really fascinating stories, I realized that very few of the authors had done any personal investigation. A lot of it was just,
hearsay.
It was hearsay. It is said that. And, I read a book saying X. And so I'm like, well, okay. But so I decided that these are interesting topics. And I'm like, well, I want to know what science says about it. I love stories. Stories are great. Stories are cool. But beyond that, it's like, but did it really happen? And if so, how do we know that? And right. So that was sort of my approach, was wanting to sort of say, okay, I love the stories. I love the creepy crawlies. I love the sizzle of the sexy things and the mysteries. That's all well and good. But I sort of want to push it to one more level and say, okay, but did this really happen? And if it didn't happen, then why is somebody saying it did happen? Is somebody making shit up? Was this a mistake? Was this a typo? Was this a hoax, or else? And if it did happen, then that's cool. Then how do we know it happened? Where's the evidence? Show me the photo. Show me the eyewitness. So that sort of got me down the path. And so I went to UNM and I got a bachelor's degree in psychology. And I started working for Skeptical Inquirer Science magazine. And I've been there for 20 years now. And in that capacity, I do editing stuff, so sort of boring, correcting people's bad grammar. But the other part of my job is investigations. And so I sort of began doing investigations, working with people like the amazing Randy and Joe Nickel and Massimo Polidoro. And so people that were sort of doing actual skeptical investigations. And I'd never seen that before. That was like, wow, they're like actually doing this. This isn't just like, well, I'm sitting in my chair and my learned opinion is like, no, screw that, man. I don't want your learned opinion. Go on site, man. Do field research, interview people, collect evidence, do all that. And so that's sort of what led me down the path, was wanting to actually investigate as best I could. And so that sort of, some of it goes back to psychology. Like I said, journalism, both my dad's a journalist, both my grandparents are journalists. And so I come from a long line of journalists and reporting and researching this and that. And then so that's sort of what led me to it. So I began just investigating crop circles. I did investigation into lake monsters in Lake Champlain and elsewhere. And then so gradually, sort of over the years, I ended up sort of doing more and more of it. And then at one point, someone's like, well, you've investigated these weird things all around the world. Like, what about here in New Mexico? I'm like, yeah, there's weird shit here too. So I should probably. So that's sort of how that all started.
I love that story, and I think it's such a cool place to come from. And I know that I don't want to speak for Alex, but that's kind of where you are, Alex, right? Like you want the proof, but you want it to be scientifically backed.
I need it. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just smart to think rationally, and a lot of these situations, it doesn't come from that perspective at all. So you got to slow down and say, let's talk about it and think about these things, that people are saying are happening. So Ben, I know you've authored and co-authored several books, but can you tell us some about some of them?
Sure. I think I've co-authored probably about a dozen at this point. So the first two books actually came out the same year. This was in 2003. And I did a book called Media Mythmakers, which is a media literacy book. And so it's like, using a critical lens to examine claims in the media and news media and social media now. So that is unfortunately a topic that is ever timely. And then I also did a book called Hoaxes, Myths, and Manias, Why We Need Critical Thinking. And that was with a sociologist by the name of Bob Bartholomew. And he lives in New Zealand now, I believe. And he's an expert on many things, but including mass hysterias. And so he and I have written about mass hysterias and when, the social contagion and sort of the aspects of that. In fact, he and I co-authored a paper that appeared in a medical journal on the Pokemon panic. You guys remember the Pokemon story? Mm-hmm. The kids that had seizures in 1997?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
If you watch the show, it would cause you to have seizures.
Right.
Exactly.
So crazy story. So that's one of the early investigations that I did. And so for those who don't know, basically it was this weird case in December 97, where all these kids in Tokyo primarily went to the hospital apparently having epileptic seizures. And they said it was caused by the cartoon Pokemon, which is it's still big, but at the time it was like super big. I mean, that is big, everything. Really big. And so it was this weird story. I remember hearing about it, and just, you know, all these kids had seizures from a cartoon, and it was this huge thing. And a couple years after that, I think in 2001, I decided to investigate it. And I won't go into too much depth of the case, but basically the mystery was basically there were two explanations for how this happened. And the medical community was sort of divided. It's like, well, we can't figure this out. So on one hand, it was pretty clear that some of the kids had what's called epileptic seizures, or photosensitive epilepsy. Mm-hmm. And this is where, like, flashing lights can legitimately cause seizures.
Trigger them, yeah.
Exactly. So this is why on some video games and sometimes on movies it says, you know, flash warning. The problem with that explanation is that it didn't account for the bulk of the kids that got sick. The incidence of PSE or photosensitive epilepsy is very small. I mean, it's a real condition. It's just not that common.
Right.
So and it's not that common. So I did a bunch of research on how common is PSE among Japanese. So I'm digging up these journal articles from, so that was the mystery was, well, this phenomena, although real and recognized, can't logically account for many, if not most of the cases. On the other hand, the other explanation that was put forth was that it was in some ways a case of mass hysteria. And that is that there was some sort of social contagion that, one person started feeling, they're coughing or they're not feeling well.
Oh, and me too.
Yeah. Oh, you too, right? So you're getting itchy. This also is a well-known condition. It's not common, but it does happen. And so one thought was that maybe there was some element of mass hysteria in the case. Now, mass hysteria doesn't mean that people are making it up. That's sort of a common misconception. Nobody's faking it. No one's putting it on. It's a real symptom. The symptoms are measurable. But the question is, what's causing it? Is it the flashing lights, or is it being around other people who are exhibiting the same symptoms? So a couple years after this happened, again, I think in 2000, I decided, here's a weird mystery that never really kind of got solved. Let me see if I can dig into it. And long story short, I dug into it, and I explained why it almost certainly was largely a case of mass hysteria. And the answer is, for those who are wondering, tell us the truth. Give us the big reveal. So in the case of the Pokemon panic, the key to solving the mystery was that if you look at the timeline, it wasn't just that this one night thousands of kids had seizures and went to the hospital. So if you take a closer look at the incidents, which I did by looking at newspaper accounts of the time, you find that there were a few dozen kids that went to the hospital. And then what happened was they went back home. The next day at school, this is the important part, at school, everybody's talking about this because, of course, they're talking about this because Pokemon sent kids to the hospital.
Right.
So everybody's talking about it, everybody's freaking out, and that's where the contagion was. That's where everybody's seeing each other. And then TV Tokyo, they're like, hey, that clip that maybe caused those seizures? Let's play that again. So as you can imagine, there was another wave of the seizures because they played the same damn clip again, and more kids got sick. Anyway, so there's that book. As you mentioned, I did a book called Scientific Paranormal Investigation, How to Solve Unexplained Mysteries, and that's actually one of the chapters in that book. I did a book called Investigating Ghosts, which won a book award. Bad Clowns, Mysterious New Mexico, which is another book that has it's a collection of my New Mexico-based mysteries, and we can go into some of those if you want. But that's sort of an overview.
That's amazing. You have a very prolific career, and I right away kind of felt like I could connect with the way that you were thinking when you were, writing the two books that I read. I know that you gave a little bit of a nod to you started investigating that because that question came up. Like, why don't you just investigate what's happening in New Mexico? Was there any other inspiration for specifically the Mysterious New Mexico book that you want to talk about besides that, or was that just basically it?
Well, no, that's a good question. I mean, basically, that was, I had done, I think at that point, 2 books for UNM Press. So I've done a total of 3 books for UNM Press. The first one was Tracking the Chupacabra, where I spent 5 years researching the Chupacabra. Some might argue that was a huge waste of time. Fair enough. I solved a cool mystery, but so my editor at UNM Press was like, hey, yeah, your Chupacabra's book is doing pretty good. What else do you have? And I'm like, well, it's always like, what have you done for me lately, right? It's like, yeah, I love you, buddy. So what do you got for me today?
What else you got?
Yeah. So at that point, I'm like, well, there, like I said, there's weird shit in New Mexico in my backyard. So at that point, I sort of turned to Mexico. I'm like, well, then there's stuff that was more the obvious stuff. Like there's Roswell. Like there's always Roswell. And then there was but I wanted to do sort of like lesser known things. So I included the story of La Llorona, the weeping woman, and this sort of, and in researching La Llorona, I mean, I talked to people who claim to have seen La Llorona in Santa Fe. I mean,
really?
So this isn't some dusty legend. This is, modern legend making. So there was that, the Loretta staircase, miracle staircase, the Aztec UFO crash, Thunderbirds, giant birds,
Chemo.
And Chemo, yeah, and the Chemo story. And Eric knows a little bit about this. So here's a quick little story on that. So I was on a TV show called Miracle Detectives. I don't know, about 8-10 years ago, and out of the blue, anyway, basically I was invited to a place called Holy Love Ministries in Ohio, I think it was. There was a weeping statue of Jesus, and I'm like, all right, let's do this, man. This is my bread and butter. You got a mystery? I'm there. So I went and investigated the weeping statue, and out of the blue, this guy emails me, and he says, yeah, I saw you on TV. I just want to let you know I was healed by the soil at Chimayo. I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, okay, well, either this guy's a crank, which, sometimes happens.
It's possible.
Or, yeah, it's certainly possible. But I'm like, well, he seems sincere. And so I'm like, I'll bite. So I emailed the guy back, and I went and met him in Albuquerque, and I met his wife, who gave me great enchiladas, and I miss them to this day. And he told me this story, and I won't go into the whole story unless you want, but basically he told me the story about how he had been the victim of a serious burn in the 1950s. So this is decades and decades old. And he said that it happened here in New Mexico, and he was badly burned. And he was in the hospital, and then at his insistence, he sort of stumped his way, on burnt chicken legs. I'm exaggerating, but he made his way up to Chimayo.
That's an awesome picture in my head now, though. It's fantastic.
and he put this healing dirt on him, and according to him, he was healed almost instantly. I'm simplifying, but this is basically the story.
Right.
So, I was like, cool. I mean, this investigation fell into my lap. So again, I met him, and I got photos of him in the book, and he was a nice guy. And again, I won't go into the whole story unless you want me to, but basically it came to be a question of evidence, right? So I have a guy who's in front of me and his wife who are sincere, fun, interesting people who are telling me about this miracle that they're saying happened to them. And my approach is, show me. I mean, I don't disbelieve you. I wasn't there. I don't know. I have no reason to doubt it. Right. I just need more than you telling me. So I'm like, I need medical records. I mean, again, this happened 40, 50 years ago. So I'm like, this is an interesting story. I will spend my time and money looking into it, whatever else. But you have to, if you want me to write about it and do research, I got to have something to go on. So
yeah.
Anyway, there's a bunch of stories like that, but that was one of them.
Speaking, I know you take a scientific approach, at least the thinking when it comes to these things. Can you talk about that process a little bit?
Yeah, one of the weird things about being interested in the paranormal and the unexplained, or however you want to frame it, is reading in the books I was talking about, and more so in since that time with the TV shows and blogs and the internet and everything else. I kept reading this idea that somehow the paranormal or unexplained, however you want to define that, were somehow beyond science. I don't even know what that would mean. Or, well, of course it's unexplained. It's mysterious. Like, no, that's not how that works. The fact of the matter is that all these phenomena, crop circles, ghosts, lake monsters, psychic powers, chupacabras, whatever the phenomena is that you're looking at that is unverified, not fully explained, however you want to phrase it, there's no reason in the world why they wouldn't be why you wouldn't apply the same principles of investigation that you do to anything else.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, there are trained investigators, and trained investigators do all sorts of things. Some of them are forensic accountants, and they investigate money fraud. There's police investigators, FBI investigators, right? There's a crime, there's a homicide. Who looks into it? Investigators.
Right.
And it's not rocket science. It's the exact same process. So you look for evidence, you look for eyewitnesses, you look for forensic evidence, you look for clues, you look for anything that corroborates the story. And so there's nothing inherently and categorically different from investigating a homicide than investigating a ghost or a Bigfoot or a crop circle. You're dealing with something that's in front of you, or something that's claimed to have happened. Mm-hmm. And there is a reason why people think that happened. Now, they may be wrong. It could be that didn't actually happen, but right. There's a reason why they think it happens. And so I realized going into it for a while now that this idea that I kept reading about is still very popular, as you guys know, that, science will never prove ghosts. Well, they won't.
Why not?
Why not? And number
two,
they won't if you think they won't. I'll tell you a quick story. I was on a TV show called Return of the Amityville Horror for Mystery Quest about 12 years ago. And there was I was there. I was at a place called the Haunted Wolf Manor in Carson, California.
Mm-hmm.
And it was and I'd been on a couple TV shows where anyway. So I was there. I'm of course the token skeptic, right? Because there's always one token skeptic, and it's often me. So I'm like, well, whatever. I know this going in. So I'm there there was a psychic. There was a team that was, I think, trained by the Warrens, and we can get into that later on. But so I'm watching them. So they show up in their van. They got one of those extra long vans. It looks like a limo van type thing. And they show up, and I think there were like 4 members of the crew, and they're unloading all this stuff. So they open up this van. It's like, all these cases of gear, and they got infrared, they got all the camera, all this sort of stuff, and so they're setting up. It's the classic stuff you see on ghost hunting TV shows.
Sure.
So I'm sitting there just watching because I'm not on camera yet. I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. So I'm watching these guys load all this gear. So they spend hours and hours setting this stuff up. Cameras in the basement, cameras here, radios. They're so proud. Like, well, look at this. It cost $18,000. I'm like, okay. Well, yeah, but this detects ghosts. Why? Because it's $18,000. Right. Anyway, so I won't tell you the whole story. But anyway, so it was a long night shooting. And so we were going back to the hotel after, I think it was about like 1 a.m. or something. And one of the producers was driving us back to the hotel, which is a couple blocks away. And so it was me and the lead guy from this ghost hunting team. And she's driving, the producer driving. It's just the 3 of us. The cameras are off. We're just chilling out. We're all tired. Gonna go back to the hotel. And so I'm like, just to pass the time, I was like, why? I asked the dude, it's like, so I'm curious, why do you think that so far we don't have good evidence of ghosts? I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just curious. We're just talking. So why do you think that that as of now, which is, I don't know, 2005 or something, there still isn't good evidence of ghosts. And he says to me, well, I don't think that scientific equipment can detect ghosts. and I thought about that for a minute, and I said, well, what was all that gear you were bringing in? Because I watched you guys unload that van for about 3 hours. So if you don't think that any of that detects ghosts,
you spent a lot of money for no reason.
And it was funny because there was this silence, and the producer, she's driving, she's like, her eyes like, ooh. And again, it wasn't a gotcha. I'm being sincere. I genuinely don't you can't have it both ways. You can't on one hand say, well, we can't prove ghosts because devices don't detect ghosts. Well, then what's all this shit you're bringing in here? Which is it? So anyway, that's the long version of the story. So that goes back to the importance that I find to bringing scientific investigation to ghost hunters. And this has been part of what I've been trying to do for almost 20 years now. So, and this is the common thing, right? So I'll talk to Bigfoot believers. I'll talk to ghost hunters. I'll talk to whatever it is. And I'll say, look, I'm not the enemy here. I mean, I get that I'm the skeptic and I'm the mean skeptic who's, pouring cold water, but it's like, it's to everyone's benefit to improve the quality of evidence. Mm-hmm. I'm not being an asshole here. I'm trying to get you to up your game so that you don't bitch and complain because, well, we gave all this great evidence to scientists, but they ignored you. No, you're not giving good evidence to scientists. They wouldn't ignore you. And so my position has always been that, I don't make fun of people who search for ghosts because I do that. Yeah, right. I don't mock out people. Oh, you crazy. You believe in Bigfoot. Like, I've been on Bigfoot research. So I take it seriously. Yeah, because I take it seriously, I find it frustrating and annoying when you have paranormal investigators who can't be bothered to learn how to do good research. They can't be bothered to do good scientific research. So then don't blame me if you're just coming up with the same old, EVP garbage. That's not my fault, man. Do better research and we'll look at it.
Yeah. One thing, the fucking spirit box, that thing is garbage. I'm sorry. And also, I always feel like a rainy cloud being a skeptic when it comes to paranormal stuff. It's like, oh man, don't try to, explain it away. Just accept that it is. And I'm like, well, I can't. That's not how my head works. But I don't know if you've ever worked with a spirit box. How do you feel about a spirit box?
So the last time I worked with an official spirit box was I was on an investigation in Fort George, which is in Ontario, Canada. And I was there with a guy named Chris Moon. I don't know if you know his name, but he used to. He I don't know if he still does, but he looks like Greg Allman, like exactly like Greg Allman. And he I think he ran Haunted Times magazine. So he's sort of he's like Jeff Ballinger, one of these sort of like, I don't want to be mean, but sort of a self-proclaimed ghost expert. Let's just put it that way. Right. So he's there, and I'm there, and it's a haunted fort, so it does have a genuine history of weird things. And it was about maybe 2 hours or hour and a half from where I lived in Buffalo at the time, so it wasn't that far. And so he just happened to be there, and so he brought out his broken radio or spirit box, I guess. And so he's twiddling the dials here, and I'm sitting back there, and it was like, oh, wow, you're Chris Moon? He's like, yeah, look at my spirit box. And it's about the size of a shoebox, and it's made of wood. It's got some dials on it, a blinky thing or two. And like the people who don't know anything about it are like, wow. I'm
this
like,
must be real. I don't understand
it. It's blinking. It must be legit. And I'm thinking, legit. And again, I'm not there to confront anybody. I'm not there to cause. I'm just, a lot of times as an investigator, you learn more from just shutting up and standing back.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, there's times if someone asks my opinion or whatever else, I'll correct them or I'll just not. But it's like, for the most part, you learn more by listening than by telling everybody, what you think. So I just sat back and I'm watching these people, and he's like, well, the way this works, he flips his long hair back. The way this works is, it's like we push this button and then it cycles through, and then the ghosts, they like manifest, and they collect those snatches of radio waves, and then it comes out in this thing here, and then you can hear the voices. And I'm thinking in my head, like, none of this is true, and I know we probably both know that none of this is true. But he's got his fawning, like, wow. So the spirit box, and actually a good friend of mine, Kenny Biddle, has done a lot on spirit boxes. So if you haven't seen his stuff, Biddle, check out Kenny Biddle's stuff. He does a lot more on the technical stuff. So he takes the devices apart, and which is more time and trouble than I'm going to put into it. But anyway, so spirit boxes, it's basically EVP. And so again, there's a whole, we could spend a whole hour on it, but basically, so you have, it's basically, people seeing patterns in random stimuli, right? So people see faces in clouds, they see faces in coffee stains, whatever else, and they also hear voices, or what they claim or believe are voices, in random stuff, right? So this is why, some ghost hunter goes to some location, they record, 8 hours between midnight and 8 a.m. and they go back and carefully listen to it, and they increase the gain, and they try to, did you hear that? This sounds like roar.
You're going to hear what you want to hear. It's this matrix thing. I can see faces on my wall right now if I stare hard enough. But but when you try to, and again, it's not us being mean. This is a fact. This is demonstrable fact. I've cited psychological studies. This is a known thing. This is not some mean skeptical theory. This is like a known thing. Yeah. But the believers, part of it is they're just so locked into it. And one of the reasons that this happens is that the TV show Ghost Hunters, among others, they have democratized ghost hunting, right? There's this sort of anti-science idea, and I get it. It's just like, well, scientists don't know everything. Well, that's certainly true, right? Well, they can't measure that, and so you have this sort of anti-authority. That's why scientists are scientists, is because they don't know everything.
That's right. That's how that works.
That's how it works.
Exactly.
I always felt that Ghost Hunters was a little bit more credible than some of the other ones, like the Zach guy,
Scooby Douche,
where fucking everything is a ghost. Everything. Oh shit! And now it's taking over my body, and I'm just like, oh my god, man. It's sad too, because I'd rather them actually take some of the things and look at it with more of a critical eye, so that with the stuff that they say, I actually cannot explain this, seems a little bit more legit at that point. But when you kind of just like cartoonize everything, and it just everything's a fucking ghost, then it just ruins it. It makes it so, I don't know.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, and that sets up this perfect thing for them, right? Where think about this for a second. Their inability to explain something counts for them as a success.
Yeah, that must be a ghost then. Yeah.
Right. Well, this sound happened and we can't figure it out. Oh, damn, I'm a good ghost hunter. Like, no, that means you're a bad investigator. So if there's like a homicide detective and they're like, I investigated that case, didn't solve it, boy, I'm good.
I figured out that a bullet did it.
Right. I know that somebody killed that person. And I don't know who it is, but I did a good job.
Boom, and just walk away, and the whole thing goes up in a fireball.
But I'll tell you, one of the problems here is that a lot of these TV shows, and I won't go too much into it, but a lot of these shows, I know for a fact that they do harm to people, because I have been called to houses and I have spoken to people face to face who are scared shitless that there's a ghost in their house. And then when I ask them, why do you think there's a ghost in their house? Their answer is, well, I watch Ghost Hunters all the time, and what I'm experiencing is something I saw on TV last week.
Right.
And they
So it must be that.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating because of course there's this legitimacy of being they're on TV, they must know what they're talking about, which of course is but it's it's really there is an element to this that I find really frustrating, again, because a lot of times I and other skeptics, particularly in the ghost hunting realm, are cleaning up the mess made by a lot of these ghost hunting TV shows. Mm-hmm. They don't care. It's entertainment. They're not trying to find ghosts. They're trying to fill an hour, and they don't care whether they're influencing people out there to think that every sound or every weird light or something they can't explain or every cold spot is a demonic entity. They don't care because that's not their. They did their show.
Yeah, I love how they jump right into it being a demon. It's that's a demon. I smell sulfur. It must be a demon.
Clearly.
So I am
parted, right?
I am somewhat of a believer. I mean, I feel like I am like Alex in the sense that I want evidence, I want proof. I want this stuff to be true because, like you, Ben, I'm very fascinated by it, and I always have been. I would spend hours in the library poring over all of these things. Yeah. And very similar to what you wrote about in Mysterious New Mexico, talking about how there's really no substance to a lot of those books. They're just more like sensationalized and really cool stories. But I've always had questions about things, and I've had experiences that I can't explain. I don't know what they are. They've happened. Sure. I'll just leave that there. But those kinds of things have always been interesting to me, and those kinds of stories. So my question for you is, do you have a favorite myth or legend based in New Mexico?
Ooh, that's a good one. Let me think. I mean, there's so many. I would say in terms of like a legend, I would probably either go with La Llorona, which we touched on earlier, and I can go into that more, or one of my favorites, because it is sort of a self-contained and famous case that I played a part in researching / debunking, would be the Chemo theater ghost. So you want me to talk about one of those?
Yeah.
Sure.
We're gonna be. We just did an episode of Chemo, which I thought was really interesting because that was one of those. I was telling Eric, I was like, when I first moved to Albuquerque 20 some odd years ago, that was one of the spots that they were like, that place is haunted. And after digging into it and really like reading and like doing some investigative work, I was like, shit, man, it doesn't seem like anything really,
Well, I mean, that's the thing about it, is you go, I mean, let's be honest, ghosts are a dime a dozen. I mean, it takes nothing to create a ghost story. That doesn't mean they're not interesting. I mean, and I love stories. I love folklore. I'm a member of the American Folklore Society. I research urban legends. I mean, this is fascinating stuff. So I've never dismissed legends. I mean, that's my bread and butter, man. I love that. But that's not the question. The question isn't, are they compelling? The question is, okay, but what's the evidence behind it, right? And so, for example, there's the St. James hotel up in Cimarron, where you've got this old hotel, and Wyatt Earp and Billy the Kid came through and had a shootout or not.
Or not,
there's the Albuquerque Press Club ghost. There's Chemo, whatever else. There's also the old Cuchillo bar down near Cruces, which I investigated, and that's one of the chapters in the Mysterious Mexico book. But yeah, the Chemo, and since you guys just did something on it, I won't go into it in too much depth, but that was an interesting one where, again, I'd heard about that growing up. I mean, like you guys, right? It's like every Halloween, Channel 7 has, don't forget our local, boy ghost, little Bobby Darnell at the Chemo Theater. And I worked with a guy named Mike Smith on it, and we did investigation there, and it was fascinating. And again, I won't go into too much depth because you guys already talked about it. It was just interesting, sort of it's rare that you're able to sort of get a ground zero for a legend like that. Usually when you research urban legends and legends in general, it's sort of like, a friend of a friend, I heard about it, blah, blah, blah. So usually tracking down the actual origin of a legend it's difficult to do, if not impossible, depending on what it is. Like the vanishing hitchhiker legend, for example, is universal. There is no single one. It's everywhere. There's different versions, different variants. No one is ever going to find the guy. Where did this start? Well, in 1938, Pascual Romero decided, like, that's not going to happen. But in the case of the Chemo Theater ghost, I was able to actually pinpoint the origin of it. And it's, the guy, Dennis Potter, who's at the Chemo Theater probably to this day. And again, I won't go into all the details. You can find in the book or wherever else, but it's like, it was, and I met him. And again, he's with so many of these cases, right? It's nobody's lying. This is not a hoax. This is not a fraud.
Right.
It is a story that got retold and twisted and moved around, and you had ghost hunters going in there and thinking everything is a ghost and sort of lumping it in there. And what was surprising to me was that, well, to be honest, it was surprising that nobody had figured it out sooner. Right. I mean, I was genuinely baffled. I'm like, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but surely somebody else must have. But you know what it is that, and this I see this over and over again. It's that far too often ghost hunters and paranormal investigators more generally, they don't want to put in the effort. Right. They of course the mystery is going to remain unsolved because they don't want to put in the time and effort to solve the case. It's not that I'm the smartest guy in the room. It's just that I put in more time, more effort, and I follow more leads, and I track down more original resources. I put them all together. So it's not that other people can't do this. It's just that most people are just like, whoa, that's crazy. It's a mystery. Who knows? What's that over there? Like, hold on. If this is interesting enough to you, if this story is important enough to you to talk about and to present about and to write about, it should be interesting enough to you to do some diligent research.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of what we've been finding this season is just that, the more you kind of just dig into things and you find real truths, and the real truths are a lot of times more interesting than the truths you've been hearing about from your buddy's buddy, and
absolutely,
I think it is, at least.
No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, in case after case, exactly as you said, oftentimes the truth behind the story is just as interesting, if not more interesting, because it really happened.
Yeah, this is actually happened, and I can prove that it happened.
Right. It's like with the Chupacabra story, right? It's like, this actually happened. I went to Puerto Rico. I interviewed the original eyewitness. This, by the way, I don't know if you guys know, this is the 25th anniversary of the Chupacabra.
Really?
This year.
That's right, because it's 95, I guess.
In fact, this month. In fact, this week.
Is it this week?
25 years ago this week.
We just put out an episode on Chupacabra too, and
last week,
it was last week, so I knew that
is true story. But again,
it must be a ghost.
It's synchronicity, right?
The ghost made us do it.
All these different angles, and so that's what I love about these topics is there's different angles and different stuff, and I love talking about it and getting people interested in it and investigating it. But as I said before, I just get sort of disappointed when people, they're interested, but just a little bit.
Right.
They want to know the truth, but if it only takes less than 10 minutes, right? It's like, anyway.
Yeah, it takes work. It takes actual work, and it takes actually caring and putting yourself into it.
Well, and again, just original research. I mean, this is, and I see this over and over again. And I talk about this in my book, particularly with the Chemo story. I mean, in fact, I even called the guy out. I won't name any names, but I found so much plagiarism. Right? Nobody does original research. It's all like, well, they just cut and paste from other people, and they put in stuff. Well, no wonder you're getting the story wrong, because you're just cutting and pasting what somebody else wrote. You're not fact checking it.
Right.
And so, it makes it more satisfying when you eventually solve the mystery, but it's just frustrating because, like, come on, guys. Come on.
Just try a little bit. Just a
little
bit.
Just do a half-assed job. That's all I ask. Just a half-assed.
Awesome. Well, let's get on. I know we've been talking about cryptids and ghosts and whatnot. Let's talk about something else. Do you believe in intelligent life on other planets?
Ooh, do I believe in intelligent life on other planets? I think it's very likely. I can't say that I believe it because that would imply that I have some basis for believing it other than, so the short answer is yes. I am virtually certain that we are not the only intelligent life in the universe. That being said, that does not imply that I believe that crop circles are made by aliens who come across the galaxy. And
crop circles are cute. I just think that's cute. It's super artistic of people. I think it's really. I'm sorry to interrupt, Ben, but
no.
I don't know how you feel about crop circles, but I just think it's people being very artistic.
No, you're right. I've made crop circles. It's fun.
Yeah, you can make them quite easy. Get a plank with some rope and start walking, and it's quite easily.
Yeah, and so again, it's another case of where crop circles are interesting in that it's one of the phenomena. It's one of the few phenomena that there's no question about whether they exist. Right. So Bigfoot. The question is, well, there's lots of questions. The main question is, do they exist? Right.
Right.
And if so, where are they? The same with psychic powers. Do they exist? If so, what form do they take? That's not the case with the crop circles. I mean, we know for a fact that crop circles exist. I mean, you can photograph them. You can be inside them. You can. So that's not the question. The question is, what made them? Right. And so there's a variety of explanations. One of my favorites, I'll just let you guys in on this. One of my favorite early explanations for crop circles was particularly horny hedgehogs. So, yeah,
in like the UK.
Yes,
yeah, in the UK, because I know they're hedgehogs in the UK. Yeah, so just horny ass hedgehogs making crop circles.
The idea this idea was put forth in I think in the early 80s. This idea was put forth that these round circles usually in barley and oats were created by like a super horny hedgehog who's like, yeah, baby. So like, they're banging away and, she's like, yeah, give it to me. And he's like, yeah, give it to me. I'm a horny hedgehog. And somehow they go around in circles for hours. Good on you, dude. Anyway, that is the least likely explanation.
And knocks over all the crops in a perfect little circle.
Right. You think
it makes
really?
sense. Man. These hedgehogs do have, quite their artistic eye.
There you go. And then don't even get me started about mysterious, substances found in the middle of that. I don't even.
Right. Well, I mean, if you think about how vast the universe is, and we don't even really understand how big it is, it would be kind of silly to think that we are the perfect and the only, life out there that has any type of intelligence at all. It's just too vast not to think, well, there's the possibility of it's super high. Can I say that there is? Absolutely not. But
yeah, no, I that's exactly how I feel. So I've never ever doubted the existence of probably beings that are smarter than us. I wouldn't doubt that for a minute. I just don't think that they're abducting hillbillies and doing anal probes and
right,
and
that's
killing
important.
Cattle. Well, like one of my favorites, like and one of the phenomena I often investigate, which actually ties in with the chupacabras, of course, is the animal mutilations question.
Right.
And it also ties in with UFOs, of course. And I remember asking some, I think it was at a conference, in the before times when you could go to conferences. And I was talking where I think we were both on the panel. I turned to him. I was like, so you think that many, if not all, animal mutilations are related to UFOs? He's like, oh yeah. I'm like, what exactly are they doing? Like, why? He's like, well, they're like, the aliens are coming down and they're making these like laser like incisions and like, so like, let's say they're from like Venus or Pluto. So what is I'm just curious here. What is the vast scientific knowledge that the Venusians gain from zooming across to Texas or New Mexico, cutting open a cow and taking out its intestines? What what possible value is this to extraterrestrials? I'm not getting it. He's like, well, we don't know. I'm like, clearly you don't.
Well, right.
And besides that, why would you need more than one of them, right? Let's
Yeah,
say you're.
but you need
you're
to
on
do
another
it multiple times.
Well, the clone them, man. You don't need to come. Just send one dude, send one little alien dude with bug eyes. You come over here. Just take the whole cow. Take the whole damn cow. Take a chicken.
You're going to learn way more. You're gonna learn way more.
Take 3.
Yeah. I don't care. Take them up there. Take them somewhere else. Experiment on them, and you're good.
Right.
You don't need to keep coming back for this.
That's amazing. Okay, so since we're on the topic of aliens, what are your thoughts about Roswell?
Roswell. So, how much time do we have?
It's a fun story.
Yeah, so I'll give you sort of the nutshell version of Roswell. Now,
okay.
I've been to Roswell a couple times. I imagine you guys have been there a couple times, right? Yeah, for the festival and okay, good stuff, fun times. Yeah, no offense to the Roswell Tourism Board, but that's the main reason to go to Roswell. Anyway, sure. So here's the thing about Roswell, and again, there's lots of nuances and trails and rabbit holes, and maybe we can go into deeper some other time. But basically, the problem with Roswell, first of all, there's not one Roswell story. There are several Roswell stories.
Right.
So this is one big thing. What is the story? Well, sit down, my child. There's more than one. So there's different accounts of what happened. There's different fields where it allegedly happened. One is on Mac Rosal's ranch. Another one is outside of town. One of the most popular stories is, of course, that a UFO was coming over New Mexico, and it was struck by lightning. And then it crashed, and that was what caused it. This right here should set off some red flags, because aircraft that we already make, that is ordinary commercial aircraft, withstand lightning strikes all the time. The average aircraft is struck by lightning once a year. It's a common thing. It's not a big deal. And certainly if you can construct a craft to come all the way across the universe, you should be able to construct a craft that can withstand a lightning strike if a small Cessna can. Anyway, so that right there is kind of sketchy. The other part of the other thing to keep in mind about the Roswell story, and again, there's lots of different trails on it, is that if you look at the original eyewitnesses, if you look at what people originally said, not 20 years later, not 50 years later, not on some Fox special, but what the original people described was things that could not have brought occupants across the galaxy to the field. Right. They described things such as lightweight aluminum type foil. They described thin light sticks and things like that. Basically,
flower tape. That was the thing that fucking got me. Scotch tape with flowers on it, and I was like, "Well, that sounds interplanetary." Right?
Because you're thinking, "What's going to get me over to Earth?" I know. We don't need an instrument panel. We don't need a chair. We don't need a kitchen. We don't need a toilet. We need Scotch tape with flowers on it. That'll get us. So yeah, exactly. So it's like, this is part of, and again, there's lots of different layers to it, but one of the basic problems is that if you go back to the original sources, if you go back to what people at the time said they saw, the original sources were pretty consistent, and it was they're scattered across this field, no bodies, no big craft, no huge skid marks. It's just sort of stuff that you might, for example, have seen in a big kite or a weather balloon, something like that. And it was only years later, and this is one of the parts that I always like to bring up, is that this happened in 1947. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't until decades later, the mid-'80s, that all the stories came out about, oh, well, Roswell, right? Oh, well, we're talking, the bodies, and this guy says he saw that, and whatever else. Well, where were you for 30 years, right? Why is it that it was only decades later that anybody thought anything unusual happened?
I love the story of the nurse that he talks about that magically doesn't exist oh, that's because she died. Oh, no,
Yeah,
just
'cause
kidding.
she
She didn't
died,
really
yeah.
die. She moved to England, and then she died.
Okay, let me clarify. So she died, she got revived, she moved to England, she died again.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
are you missing?
And no one ever found her name. Like no one ever
Right.
found her name.
And it's like, and this is part of the problem is that particularly with UFOs, and I've done some stuff on UFOs in my book Mysterious New Mexico. I talk a little bit about Roswell, but honestly, to me, the more interesting UFO crash is in Aztec, New Mexico, which is much less known, but a big, fat, bizarre, lurid, juicy story in and of itself. One of the things you see is again, it's so frustrating because doing this research is hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, with all these topics, and particularly with UFOs, it's full of fraud and fake and liars and con men and delusional people and crazy ass stuff. And I mean, you get that in any field, but there's Bigfoot hoaxers. We can go into that, but just for some reason, the UFO community is especially ripe with just flat out, and you can see why, right? Part of it is because if you want to make a name for yourself, if you want to be known as, well, I have inside information, you're like, well, do you have some tenuous connection to Roswell? Well, my uncle's next door neighbor lived there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, shit, there you go. Can you prove it? Well, no, but
No.
they come out of the woodwork, and you saw the same thing with Area 51.
Mm-hmm.
And people just come out of the woodwork with these crazy ass stories that even the believers are like, dude, that's a crazy ass story. And still they're like, oh, well, they still get trotted out on these TV shows. It's just like, come on, man.
It sells, man. People want it to be real. They want they want that to be. If there was proof of ghosts, then that'd mean, oh, great, there's an afterlife, which means I don't have to stress so much. And then it's like, oh, there's aliens. Well, that makes so much sense because of this, and this. Oh, the pyramids and this and this. So it's like you say before, it's an easy explanation. And but I want to believe. I'd love it.
I mean, again, I love these stories. I'm not a naysayer. I'm a debunker in that in specific cases, I will sometimes, often depending on what the case is, I will end up debunking it. But I don't go into a case trying to debunk or disprove it. I'm going in there trying to figure out what's going on. If the answer is that there's a ghost somewhere, or there's a chupacabra somewhere, or there's some mysterious thing, great. That's awesome, man. Yeah. I want to be there. I want to document it. I want to see it with my own eyes. So I don't wake up in the morning and think, wow, what can I debunk or disprove today?
I want to fuck up someone's day.
Yeah. Like, how can I make an 8-year-old cry? No, it's like, all right, here's the interesting mystery. Let me bring my best skills to try and solving it. And sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. But at least I know that I put forth the effort.
Right. Oh, wow.
Just a couple more questions.
Yeah, just a couple more questions. Red or green?
Green.
Nice.
Green. Nice. Okay. I'm a red guy. Actually, I usually do Christmas. I do both.
Yeah.
I'm Christmas. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Any favorite New Mexican restaurant?
I have two. One of them is El Camino on 4th. It's about a block from Dan's Boots and Saddles and Moses Country.
Okay. Yeah.
El Camino restaurant. They have great carne adobada. It's literally the only place I eat carne adobada. And the second place is just down the street on the 4th at Mary and Tito's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The freeway.
Nice.
So those are, if I have to eat somewhere else, Mexican food, I don't. I just like, you know what? Screw it. If El Camino and Mary and Tito's are closed, then I'll just do without.
Those are your places.
Pretty much.
That makes sense. Would you, this is kind of a hopeful question. Would you be willing to come back on the show and discuss the Aztec alien event with us at some point?
Absolutely. Anytime, man. It's a great story, and I dug into it. And yeah, it's the Aztec story. It's got everything. It's got weird claims. It's got, I don't want to give it away, but it's got the whole package, man. I'd be happy to talk about it.
Awesome.
I don't think I know that one.
Well, you're in for a treat.
And I grew up in Durango, so
oh, okay.
I'm surprised I haven't heard about that. Where can listeners find your books?
So my books are available. Normally, I would say at local bookstores, but good luck with that, unfortunately.
Right.
But I always encourage people to patronize local bookstores. Bookworks on 4th, Treasure House in Old Town, places like that. But Page One. If you can't get there, which I understand, the usual places: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I also have a podcast called Squaring the Strange. And it's currently a bi-weekly podcast, and I have a couple co-hosts, one of whom actually lives not too far from me in Rio Rancho. And we just recently did a couple episodes on all sorts of weird stuff, including rumors going around about crazy COVID rumors. And then we have an upcoming episode on the chupacabra and mermaids and merfolk.
Ooh.
And so we could sort of cover a little bit of everything.
That's cool.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap this up?
No, other than just, I appreciate the intelligent questions. Oftentimes when people, I'm not just blowing smoke up your ass. A lot of times when people interview me, they don't have a clue. They're like, oh, okay, what did you do? Okay, yeah. So it's like, oh man, it's like you're just answering like basic 101 questions, and you're just like, okay, fine. But no, it's a pleasure to talk to people who like know about this stuff, are interested in it, and share that. So I want to thank you guys for having me on.
Thank you, man. Thank you. It's really appreciated.
It's definitely our pleasure. We, Alex and I, we texted a little bit, well, in the middle of this to say, oh my God, this is so cool. We are so excited to have you on and just to hear from your experience. It's been an amazing time for us. We've enjoyed it thoroughly, and I think our listeners are going to enjoy it as well. I'm not going to lie, I was a little upset when I read your Chupacabra book because I really wanted that to be true. And you just popped my bubble, but you did it in such a great way that I wasn't too mad at you.
There's
so thank you for
that dark cloud.
Well, I'll just put it this way: parts of the Chupacabra story are true.
Right.
I'll just leave it at that. So it's not a total debunking. There, parts of it are, the whole thing is weird. Parts of it are truer than others. I'll just leave it at that.
Some parts are very sensationalized and out of control, and that's the fun part of the story for me. But that's okay. I'm not mad. I'm grateful that you did the legwork, and I appreciate being able to read, about what you've done, just because it saves me time, because I am lazy and I don't want to go out and do the legwork. So,
well, thank you. I genuinely appreciate that. As a skeptic and everything else, as you can imagine, I get a lot more hate mail than good jobs. So I appreciate it. And again, thanks for having me on. And let's circle back and we'll talk about some more New Mexico mysteries sometime.
Awesome. We love that.
Thank you so much. Stay spooky, everybody.
Stay spooky. That's my line anyway.